if you've ever been through a job interview, it's impossible not to have had moments such as, hey, but was my answer really suitable for their question? And more often than not, your answers become better as you practice them before the interview. And there are some interesting scenarios there when I talk about today when it comes to behavioral questions. The first one being for a question such as, are you easy to get along with? And most people would have a reactive approach. Of course I'm easy to get along with. I mean, all my team members like me, and I always listen to everyone, to whatever I want to say, and I always try to please them as much as I can. You see, this is not a terrible answer, but your goal is to come up with really good answers. So if you think about it in a behavioral way, are you easy to get along with would be a synonym to a question such as, could you think of a time where you exhibited interpersonal skills? And the way you would answer it, of course, in my current role, I'm working on a project with other 5 team members where we have to deliver a software application, and there are many challenges because we're very much a startup, and team communication, interpersonal skills are an essential element of any successful delivery of our software. So for this, we would have regular meetings. We always keep things updated and complement each other within our work. And whenever we feel like something is not right, we just stand up and say, I should rather say, we raise that issue with that person that's responsible for the specific feature. And usually I always try to listen to other members of my team. And the project is working quite well. As you can see, we managed to deliver the software application to hundreds of thousands of people. We managed to maintain it for a number of years. So notice here that I talked about a specific situation, and then I went on with the how. Why am I a team player? Right. So always think about it like this. You must think of a specific situation, and then think about the skills and the leadership principles and everything else. First is you must have a strong answer, strong situation, a strong case, and only then think to motivate your skills and your behavior within that context. All right, let's look at the second example here. What if pretty much everyone is asked why Amazon during an interview. What happens here is that many people give answers such as, Amazon is the most amazing company on earth, and I'm very much a believer of your customer obsession mentality, and I always wanted to work for this company. Now, what happens with this answer? Again, it's not a terrible answer. I mean, if you're genuinely interested to work at Amazon, but who isn't? I mean, there are millions of people who apply for Amazon each year. So your answer is rather generic and won't score you any points when compared to other applicants. Now, a better approach here would be to say something like this, and I usually coach people to answer it like this. I want to work at Amazon for 3 reasons. The first reason, of course, you can go on and talk about how great is Amazon, to praise Amazon. But the second reason, you should really say a few words. Why can you make a difference? How can you make a difference at Amazon? Why would they pick you and not someone else? How can you differentiate yourself from the other applicants? Right? And the third reason would be, what's in for you? What do you win from this? Where do you see yourself in the next 5 years? Right? So, for example, many people that I know come up with something like, hey, I worked for 15 years in this rather large corporation, but I think my projects can only go this far in terms of scale. So Amazon has a scale that's never seen before. So this is an essential reason of me becoming super interested in this opportunity. So again, I would really structure it this way: I want to work at Amazon for 3 reasons. Of course, some people might prefer to say it at once, all the 3 reasons at once, but those people are usually extraordinary communicators, and they are really good at communicating multiple things in the same sentence. So unless you know what you're doing, or unless you really practice this for a few days, I would rather recommend you to go with the 3 reasons. Okay, but be specific and think of it like this: you must score points after all, right? You must differentiate yourself. Let's move on. The third example. What's your weakness? A ton of people come up with what we call in HR turning a positive into a negative, such as, I believe my weakness is that I work sometimes too hard. I mean, come on, of course you work hard. You're applying for a well-paid job that's probably 0.3 best paid jobs in the world. I mean, who doesn't work hard for these types of things? It's just normal you work hard. Well, if you may say, okay, but I believe work-life balance is something that I struggle with at times. And because, for example, I'm applying, I live now in New York and my wife lives in Seattle and the job is in Seattle, so work-life balance is not the best thing that I'm good at right now, which would be fixed if I do this. Could work. Again, it wouldn't be my first preference, but still it would be much better than saying I work too hard at times. So working hard is actually an asset, not a liability, especially in a job. And there are many, to give you some examples here, what are some good weaknesses? Of course, in many cases, public speaking is the most used. Just don't mention Toastmasters, please, because everyone in America does. If you're applying for a technical role, you could talk about your sales experience as a weakness, maybe, or vice versa. For a sales role, you don't have deep technical expertise. Just ensure that you emphasize that you do have good understanding of what you're selling, more often than not AWS. Could be introversion, and there are many others. I've done multiple videos about this, so you should check them out if you like ideas for this. And finally, number 4, the fourth scenario that I want to talk about here, a time when you had a conflict on a team. What if I answer this like in the following way? I remember 4 years ago I had a teammate who was really rude with me, and whenever we had a challenge, he didn't listen to me, and he never paid attention to details. And in fact, I always try to help them, to ramp them up, and to really make them understand that they must do a great job. I even raised this issue with my manager. Unfortunately, he ended up leaving the project, but our projects were always successful. So, needless to say, this is a terrible example, but why it's a terrible example might not be so obvious. So first of all, it's a terrible example because it's a negative one. When someone asks you, tell me about the conflict you had on your team, it doesn't have to be a bad story, a negative story. It doesn't have to end in a negative way. But this is the least important of the two problems of this. The real problem with this answer is that you put the blame on someone else. It will really look like you're the type of person that he said, she said types of things. Right? So I always said, the other guy we couldn't understand each other, he was terrible. Right? It's not your job to talk about someone else in a job interview. In a job interview, talk about yourself. Talk about your strengths, sometimes about your weaknesses, and how your different behaviors, your past behaviors as a predictor of future behavior. If you end up putting the blame on other people on your team, to be honest with you, you have no chance getting into Amazon. So that's one of the most obvious disqualifiers in HR. So now what's a good example? How could you rephrase that situation? By taking ownership of those things. In a previous project, me and my colleague, I had a colleague with whom we weren't getting along too well. We had both strong mentalities, and for example, in one such instance, we had to deliver some software application, and he had his idea for layout, and I had my idea for for the layout, and we really held strong opinions about this. And what I did there was always to try to diffuse the situation by communicating efficiently. So I'd call him on meetings, and he did too, to really discuss what was the best interface layout when it comes to delivering the software. And whenever we wouldn't be able to arrive to a conclusion, we would call in our manager, and it did happen, and it did happen quite often actually, that he was right about some prototypes. Our manager agreed with him, in which case I would definitely defer to their judgment and implement it this way. But the main takeaway from this project is, despite the fact that we weren't getting along each other because of our strong personalities, we always delivered on our commitments, and I believe we've done this with great quality. You see, notice that I didn't put the blame on anyone here. I talked everything from my perspective. I took ownership of the situation, and even if I'm not perfect, which I also emphasized there, we did manage to get along, even if the situation was really impossible. Now, of course, you could talk about when being asked a time when you had a conflict on your team. You could talk about someone else having a conflict, other two members having a conflict. But still, be careful not to put the blame on anyone, not to say that one was bad and one was good. They had their differences in opinion, and you've done whatever you could to address that, right? But limit the time that you talk about what they did as opposed to what you did, because the interview is always about yourself. Very careful about this. And of course, this being said, it should come without saying that talk about I did this instead of we did this. Of course, sometimes it makes sense to say we, but generally speaking, say I did this. Take ownership of these things. So these are the 4 scenarios that I thought would be interesting to share with you today. As always, thank you very much for watching.